Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so we are continuing on with Avengers and New Avengers, and in this one, we're picking up with the Black Priests. Now, the Black Priests were a wildly confusing concept among the comic book fan base when they were initially introduced, because it was kind of hard to wrap our heads around the idea of how they functioned, what they did, like how they worked, that kind of a thing. This will clear all that up, right? Like this will clear all that up and make it all make sense, right? So what we end up doing here is picking up with this space. It's basically the nothing space of destroyed universes. All this is basically the space that universes occupied before they were wiped out. Right now, one of the cool things to point out here is the way that Jonathan Hickman's able to pull this off is because of the old Captain Britain comics with Mad Jim Jaspers. That's why he's able to pull this off, because that was really the first time in Marvel Comics that we got a depiction of what a universal space looks like when its universe is destroyed, right? You had Mad Jim Jaspers from Earth 238 who had wiped out all the superheroes. The Omniversal Development Court didn't know that, and so they basically initiated the push, which is to say pushing the evolution of the various denizens on that Earth and basically jump-starting the creation of mutants. This led to Mad Jim Jaspers getting pissed off and initiating the Jaspers War, which threatened the entirety of the multiverse. And so in order to keep that from happening, the Omniversal Development Court obliterated his entire universe, right? Just wiped the whole thing out, and it was just a giant white void. That's what's left whenever a universe is destroyed, just a giant white space, right? It's like a white piece of paper with nothing drawn on it. And that's what the multiversal Avengers have been finding. They've been going from universe to universe and either finding a giant white space or encountering like the Sidera Madres, right? So like the map makers, they encountered a Black Priest on a world and they destroyed that Black Priest, but like that was just a lone Black Priest out there somewhere. What they've done here is probably the worst possible thing they could have, which is to land in the main base of operations of the Black Priest. Now, one thing to know, they don't know where they're going, right? That's the reason why Robert DaCosta told Thor, this is a one-way trip. They don't know what universe they're going to end up in, right? They can't plan and direct where it is they're going to arrive at. They literally just open a portal, jump to the next universe, and then whatever's there is there, right? So they could end up in an entire universe that's filled with like the Mad Celestials, for example, from Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, and then just be completely and totally subdued. There's a possibility for them to escape if things get bad enough, but the issue is that this portal is rapidly closing because as soon as they arrive, the Black Priests are prepared for them, right? The Black Priests were basically waiting for them to show up and immediately start closing the portal off, right? So there's no real way for them to escape. And so because of that, a massive battle immediately starts breaking out. And this is when the Black Priests start to use their words, right? They start to use the phrases they use in order to wipe things out. Now, this is what confused people, right? This is what threw people off, is how the Black Priests function, right? Because the magic of a particular word. So to make this clear and make this easy to understand, let's say that what we wanted to do was we wanted to turn a table into a chair, right? We wanted to rematerialize the table. We wanted to alter its atomic structure so that we could turn it into a chair. And let's say that we had to have a spell to do it, right? Let's say the spell was table into chair, right? 3 words. The way that you and I work is we can just say table into chair, and then the table becomes the chair. With Black Priests, it doesn't work that way. One priest can say table, one priest can say into, and one priest can say chair. And in order to turn the table into a chair, they have to speak those words in sequence. They come together, right? So if you kill any one of those priests, they cannot turn the table into a chair because the word they need to basically, perform that spell is gone now, right? It doesn't exist, right? So that's the way the Black Priests work. But that's also what makes them so incredibly powerful, because they're capable of wild feats. But if you guys notice, because of that huge caveat, they're almost kind of broken, right? Like you would think that like if they really are that powerful, they would be able to use all those words, right? Like you wouldn't need a whole bunch of priests in order to do something. Any one of them could do it. But as a collective entity, as a collective whole, they are insanely powerful. But there is a reason why they function that way. And this reason will be explained here in a minute. But the cool thing is that in the middle of all this, basically like with the Black Priests destroying ex nihilo everywhere, almost all over the place, the battle is boding ill for the multiversal Avengers. They quite literally showed up in the lion's den and they're falling just rapidly, right? Person after person after person is falling, when really it just kind of ends up dwindling down to the core group, right? Abyss, Ex Nihilo, Thor, Hyperion. But then we also end up finding out that Thor has Mjolnir. Now, this is not the Mjolnir from the main Marvel universe, right? Remember, this took place after the events of Original Sin. Odin's son is not worthy of wielding his own hammer anymore. That belonged to Jane Foster. faster. But the reason why Thor has this hammer is that if you guys recall, we had a previous video that we did where we had an alternate reality Avengers team that were evil, and that the hammer said that the hammer was made for that evil version of Thor, right? Whosoever holds this hammer, if they be unworthy, shall possess the power of Thor's, spelled with 2 R's. And once that Avengers team was defeated, they ended up, of course, traveling back to their own universe, but the hammer stayed behind. If you guys recall that, that's where Thor gets this hammer. This is one of those moments where Jonathan Hickman does something 15 issues ago, and it doesn't become important until right now. It's one of the reasons why Hickman's so cool when it comes to writing stories, because you kind of have, it's easier to follow if you just read it in its entirety all at one time, as opposed to like waiting for piece by piece to come out, because it can kind of create issues, right? That's why I always felt Hickman is a great trade paperback writer, right? He writes for the trade, and it's cool. It's awesome to see how this is done. But Thor, of course, recalls his hammer and is like relishing in the experience, right? Like, it's so good to finally have this hammer back, and it's so good to finally rip these guys up, right? To tear these guys apart, and to use it the way that I always used to. And it's kind of interesting because despite what the Black Priests try to do in terms of quelling the hammer, they can't, right? They can't quite quell the hammer. But the multiversal Avengers also start picking up on the idea that if they start killing members of the Black Priests, they won't be able to complete certain spells. And so that's what happens. They literally start destroying as many priests as they can find to prevent them from being able to use the spells. Now, the other thing is there's only a finite number of priests. And so when a priest is destroyed, that word is gone forever, right? So imagine that you could never, ever, ever speak the word happy, right? Like, imagine you could never speak that word again. How would you convey that emotion? How would you convey the fact that you are happy? There are other words that are close to it, but none of them quite really, convey how it is that you're feeling, like the word happy. And so with that word gone, for them, it's doubly so, because now there's spells that they can't use. There's things that they simply can't do. But in the middle of all this, with these priests falling, suddenly they stop, right? They stop what they're doing. And the question becomes why? And they say, because the Eye is coming. The Eye is here, right? The leader of the Black Priests is coming. And when the multiversal Avengers are like, what in the world's going on? And they basically go to attack him, suddenly they're all frozen in place, right? They can't move. And so it's like, well, who in the world is this? The head of the Black Priest takes off his helmet, and it's Doctor Strange. Stephen Strange is now the one who's leading the Black Priest. But Doctor Strange brings the multiversal Avengers to his location, right? He brings them to his citadel and kind of explains what's going on with the nature of the Black Priest. Remember, Doctor Strange was not always part of the Black Priest, but in the 8-month time jump, he had actually left Earth and traveled out into the multiverse and encountered the Black Priest. And what he basically learned is one, what I already told you guys about how they use their words in order to create spells, but two, the Black Priests are enigmatic. And the reason why they're enigmatic is because they are the multiverse's own defense system. It's like antibodies for the multiverse. They don't belong to anybody. They weren't created by anybody except for the universe, the multiverse itself. That when the multiverse started dying, where we do have things like the Ivory Kings, and you've got all this kind of stuff going on, the multiverse sought to defend itself. And in order to defend itself from its own destruction, it created the Black Priests. And what the Black Priests were doing was going from world to world and destroying those worlds, as many as they could, or at least enough that would stabilize the collapse of the multiverse. That's really what they are. That's the entire basis behind it. Unlike the Illuminati in the beginning and the Cabal now, where they're basically traveling from world to world and wiping them out simply in an effort to save their own, what the Black Priests are trying to do is stabilize the collapse of the multiverse. They don't want to kill every world. They don't want to destroy every world out there. They just want to stop the collapse, right? They want to stop this kind of cascading effect of everything basically dying. And so what you end up getting here is the question, where the Black Priests start asking things like, have you seen them? Like, have you seen the Ivory Kings? Like, have you encountered them? What can you tell us about the Ivory Kings? Have you found out a way to defeat them, right? Remember, we still don't know who the Ivory Kings are. We haven't met them yet, right? Like, they're just beings who are out there that are wildly powerful. And that's kind of what's going on. Doctor Strange explains that there's basically a war out there. You've got what's going on Earth, right? It always does, right? The Illuminati, Captain America, blah, 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 blah. But on a bigger scale, you've got Rabu Malal, the Great Destroyer, the person who seemingly started the incursions. And then you've got the Ivory Kings who are part of the incursions. We don't really know what their role is, but those two groups are going to war, right? The forces of Rabu Malal, the forces of the Ivory Kings are at war with one another. The multiverse is collateral damage, right? The destruction of the multiverse hinges on this. And what you had is the Black Priest who emerged as the multiverse trying to defend itself from being destroyed as a means to try to balance out this collapse, right? So a lot of like huge parts going on way out there in the multiverse itself, which really seems to dwarf what's going on, based on Earth. But you end up having this idea where the group kind of comes together, and really it's Starbrand who kicks out the idea and says, okay, then here's what we'll do, right? We'll send one group out there to basically find Rabu Malal. Like we'll one group will go out there, find Rabu Malal, and they will kill him. They will end they'll end his reign. and basically, you know, try to find some way to stop the incursions through his death. And then we'll send another group out there to face off against the Ivory Kings, and they will kill the Ivory Kings and basically destroy both of these warring parties. When they're out of the way, we can focus the totality of our efforts on finding a way to stop the incursions. And so that's when it's kind of thrown out there, okay, now's our chance. Now, like literally flip a coin, right? Like whoever picks heads goes after Abu Malal, whoever picks tails goes after the Ivory Kings, right? From there, we switch back to Reed Richards and to all these guys, and we actually have Reed Richards kind of sending off a message to Valeria, right? It's one of the things that Reed always does, is basically communicate with his kids, kind of teach them lessons when he can, where he can. And one of the things that Hickman hits on here is that Reed has always kind of seemed dispassionate and disconnected, when the reality is anything but. And he basically kind of goes and gives her this lesson on how to win battles, on how to win conflicts. And so he calls this one Making Plans and the Proper Execution Thereof. And he basically says that he sees so many potential future outcomes, right? The potential outcomes out there are just infinite, and there are some that are optimistic, and there are some that are less so. And so one of the things he tells her is you have to be your absolute best. And we kind of end up switching over to basically the Archangel Helicarrier, right? The one ran by Captain America. And what Reed had done here was initiate the first step of the plan. That, remember, Captain America and his forces track the Illuminati using their translocation, which is to say whenever the Illuminati teleport from one location to the next, the Captain America tracks the signal and then tries to locate them. And while he usually ends up being late, at the very least, it does give him the belief that he's basically closing in on them faster and faster, right? The more they use this technology, the more adept S.H.I.E.L.D. becomes at tracking it, the faster they can get to its location. And so what we end up having is Reed Richards teleporting a chess piece, just like 3 inches, just enough to set off a signal, enough for S.H.I.E.L.D. to pick it up. And so right off the bat, you immediately know it's a trap. And that's exactly what's said by Sam Wilson, right? You know, where Maria Hill and Sam Wilson are there as kind of advisors for Steve Rogers, the response of Sam Wilson is, okay, look, the issue here is that they were just in Rome, right? It wouldn't make any sense if they were more or less in the same vicinity to suddenly teleport to another location in the same place, right? They're still in Rome. And so Sam Wilson's kind of like, it doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't add up. They know that we can track them. So they wouldn't be dumb enough to teleport and then teleport again, right? Like, because they know that we would find them. Like, what this means is, like, if they've done this, it's because they intend for us to find them. And Steve Rogers is like, I know it's a trap, right? But at this point, he doesn't care, right? It doesn't really matter to him. Switch over to James Rhodes. And what James Rhodes is doing is basically piloting a whole, a veritable army of War Machine robots, basically. He's piloting them all from a single device. Now, it has had somewhat of a mental toll, but at the end of the day, he still seems to be able to pull it off. But the translocation signal comes from this one particular area. And so you have all these War Machines who show up there, and they're looking for this signal, and they're like, we're right on top of it, only for them to realize they are on top of it. They're on top of the Hulk, who immediately comes smashing out of the ground, right? And just starts tearing these guys up. And that's when Reed comes in with this next lesson, right? He says, for example, it's been said many times that if you wait for all the information necessary to make a correct decision, the opportunity to make any decision at all might have passed you by. And then he says, of course, the opposite of that idea is the uncomplicated maxim, go with your gut. The argument there being instinct is an evolutionary good bet, which is true until you run into something or someone a little higher up on the food chain, or in some instances, maybe just a bit more hungry. Most people, even gifted ones like yourself, talking to Valeria, tend to favor one of these two principles, but the best course of action is an amalgamation, maintaining a constant awareness of both concepts and waiting to act until the moment they intersect, waiting until both instinct and intellect collide. To put it bluntly, what you're looking for is a plan that can be executed with precision, but also implemented atemporally, minimize variables, maximize flexibility. This is an awesome lesson to learn. It's basically saying you want to be in a position to where you have a plan, but you also want to make sure that plan can adjust on the fly. You do not want to be rigid, because if you're rigid, as soon as that plan ends, everything goes to pot. Now, here's the other cool thing that comes out of this, right? You basically end up having Captain America launching a couple different strikes. You've got the War Machine suits that are out there. The Illuminati are now there. So you've got Black Panther, you've got Beast, you've got Reed Richards, you've got Captain Britain. The Incredible Hulk, of course, is there. And the Incredible Hulk is just laying waste, right, to all these different these different War Machine robots. Enter Carol Danvers. One of the more interesting things here is the power of Carol Danvers, right? I remember going to see the Captain Marvel movie, and I saw that interview where Feige was like, Carol Danvers is the most powerful person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As her binary form, yes, right? When she's channeling the power of a star, absolutely, she's the most powerful person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Carol Danvers, when it's just Carol Danvers, not a chance. And that's exactly what happens here, right? Like, literally, the Incredible Hulk, like, she she tackles the Incredible Hulk, just starts pummeling him, and then when she's done and she starts catching her breath, he's like, do you feel better? And then just pummels her into the sky, right? Let me tell you something. Carol Danvers is cool, but regular Carol Danvers, not a chance. No way she stands a chance against like the Incredible Hulk. No, that's not gonna happen. No one believes that. Nobody should believe that. But with Carol Danvers being sent flying again, the Incredible Hulk is back onto the battlefield, not having to focus on her, and we're right back into it again. And then Reed Richards continues on. He says, another thing you need to consider is consistency of disposition. Can you remain calm while executing your plan? The answer to this must always be yes. Psychological warfare is the tool most often used by anyone standing in opposition to you achieving your goals. Manipulation, ultimatums, the threat of physical or emotional harm. These are tools of resistance. And while they may not be sufficient to stop you, like barnacles on a ship, they are enough to cause drag and put your goals in peril. You must, at all times, maintain composure. Now, I want to warn you, Valeria, there are those who will not understand this disposition. They will call you cold and unfeeling, which is untrue. We feel as much as anyone. We hurt, we cry, but keep it in check until later. Like that's an incredibly important lesson that Valeria needs to learn, right? That the world will see her as somebody disconnected and unfeeling and uncaring. The reality of that is the exact opposite, that in order for that plan to succeed, she cannot be emotional, right? You cannot be an emotional person. You have to be able to stick to your guns. You've got to be able to stay strong, to keep your conviction in the face of overwhelming uncertainty. Only in doing that can you actually see your plans to fruition. And so with that being the case, you end up having Captain America, who's consistently, who's basically making his way over the site, right? The whole idea of the war machines and all that kind of stuff, that was a preliminary attack, right? That was an initial strike. It was there to try to maintain or at least create a kind of battle zone. And then once Captain America and his forces get there, then to deploy the actual package. And so once Captain America and his forces get to the location, Reed Richards chimes in again, and he says, and finally, we come to strategy, how to achieve your goals. I won't bother going into limited scenarios, clearly defined opponents or situations. These are simple, and you are well beyond needing your father's advice on handling those. A ship pops out of nowhere. It says, attention, agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then we go back to Reed. But when facing a well-seasoned or truly gifted opponent, you must always attempt to redefine your opponent's base understanding of the encounter. You attack their primary hypothesis. For example, if there is an expectation that a conflict is between two parties, one of them being yours, the first thing you do is you introduce a third. And that's when we end up finding out that Robert DaCosta is part of this, that Robert DaCosta is part of the plan of Reed Richards, that this has all been the plan of Reed the entire time. Robert DaCosta's New Avengers, all that stuff has all been a part of Reed's plan. And so what we end up doing is switching over to Dr. Doom, right? I know a lot of you guys were really curious about this. Dr. Doom, the Molecule Man, a lot of you guys really wanted to know what was going on. And it's kind of a funny thing here because Doom has been putting the pieces together, right? While everything else has been going on, while everything else has been happening, Robert DaCosta forming his own team that goes out into the multiverse and so on and so forth. You've got Captain America chasing down the Illuminati. You've got the Illuminati trying to stop the Cabal, and all of them are trying to find some way to end the incursions. Dr. Doom has been working inside his citadel to figure out, to answer questions, right? To get questions sorted out. And it's one of these things where he starts talking to the Molecule Man, who is kind of progressively going crazier. And what Dr. Doom really hits at here is there is something big going on, and that the Molecule Man Owen Reese has everything to do with it, right? Like everything that's happening with the incursions seem to basically tie into Owen Reese. And the reason why is because the energy emanating off this fragment, this rock, the one that fell when the incursion happened on Earth in Latveria when we first encountered the map makers, Dr. Doom's been analyzing it. And the energy signature of this rock matches the energy signature of Owen Reese. So something is going on here. And it's one of these things where Owen Reese is like, this is kind of strange, like, and initially he almost kind of, throws out the idea that Dr. Doom's a liar. And Dr. Doom's like, I'm not a liar, right? I never lie. And Owen's response is, yeah, but if what you believe is the truth, and if what you were told, if somebody told you something and they said this is the truth, and you believe it because they told you, but what they told you was a lie, are you not a liar? Maybe you're a liar unintentionally, but a liar nonetheless, because what you're saying is not true, regardless of the reasons for why you believe it. And this is basically Owen Reese telling Dr. Doom, nothing that you believe is going on here is actually right. Like nothing you believe is going on here is correct. Nothing's transpiring. Like there's what you believe is happening. There's what the Avengers believe is happening. There's what Captain America thinks is happening. There's what everybody out there thinks is happening, but none of them really know the truth. And so he says, let me show you. Let's go on a trip. Snaps his fingers and the two of them disappear. Now, undoubtedly, you guys are probably asking, where in the heck did they go? They teleported to the very beginning of the incursions. They're teleporting to the place where the whole thing gets explained. We find out how the incursion started. We find out everything going on with like Rabumalal, and we find out what's going on with the Ivory Kings and all that kind of stuff, which we'll cover later because we are bringing this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explain, cliffhangers, if you are new here to Comics Explain, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like and I will catch you all later. Peace.